Now, the guy who's been responsible for making everything work, Quin Snyder, obviously is another polarizing name in the community as well. We can talk about sometimes his rotations aren't the best. Obviously, we remember the Orlando fourth quarter. What are we doing right now? Rotation. We get it,
I almost forgot about him opening the fourth quarter with Niang and Barlow together in a playoff game. That was not my favorite thing.
That was tough, but
it was rough.
He's also been responsible for the development of players, the staff that he's put together.
Yeah,
and I tell people this too. If you remember the Hawks when they were healthy towards the beginning of the season, NBA Cup time, that version of the team could play different types of games. I've said the issue with the team the last 2 years with DeJounte, or the last year, I guess year and a half with Quin, where DeJounte was there, was that they couldn't stop anybody. They had to score 120 to win games, basically. Or you just have to hope they have a terrible offensive night. But I remember that stretch at the beginning of the year when they were in the NBA Cup, they were able to defend well enough where if they weren't great offensively, they could still keep it a lowerish scoring game. Make it so they could still have a shot. Because usually it's just like, when you get the playoff time, sometimes it's just low scoring games. You just got to be able to make enough offense. And then once Jalen went down, DeAndre was traded, then it kind of went back to we got to score if we're going to win games for the most part. And so Quin's had to adjust multiple times with the personnel that he has had. Now that they fired Landry, people have wondered, what does this mean for Quin? I think he still is. I've said before, this coming season, again, since it's a winning season that they want to have, he's going to be under some pressure to win some games. That comes along with that. What do you think of Quin now going into his third full year next year, and just how he's done as the coach of the Hawks? Because he's also got Trae Young to buy in, which I think is extremely important.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It is a mixed bag, and most coaches are. I mean, even unless you have Eric Spoelstra or something like. My broad framing on Quin has been, and it still is now, like, I don't think he's a top 5 coach in the league. I also think he's very clearly not a bad coach. I think he's a good coach. He's respected around the league. There are rotation issues. And look, I'm guilty of this too, like we all are. Those are things that we can easily see from the outside. So they get played up and magnified. And they matter. I think he made some mistakes there this year. I would also, in his slight defense, say, like, he had a pretty limited roster, especially in the second half of the year when you take away Jalen and your top 2 backup centers. Suddenly you're without 3 of your top 4 bigs for the entirety of the last 2 months of the season. That's pretty tough for anybody. You got really limited personnel. You mentioned earlier in the season, you're 100% right, like about the way they wrote up mixed match lineups. Quin should get credit to some degree, not all of it, but some credit for the Hawks being much, much better defensively this year on the whole. Like when Jalen went down, they were a league average defense, which may not seem like much, but they had been bottom 5 for 3 straight years basically before that. And they still finished, I think it was like 18th in defense, even without Jalen, without any backup centers at the end of the year, and getting worse there. So like he gets credit for that. He gets credit for the shot profile. The Hawks have one of the better shot profiles in the league. They didn't make a lot of shots at times this year. They don't have great shooters, but they have a really good offensive system. You mentioned Trae, getting Trae to buy in. That's been more honest to people like us that are watching every game than it is to people that are not watching every game. But like the little things there, Trae is the captain of the offense, obviously, but has made the ships go, and that's with Quin's direction. And getting Trae to buy in is not a small thing. That's credit to Quin Snyder. So yeah, I think that he is a pretty good to good coach. And I get the nights that he makes everybody crazy, including me, that will acknowledge that. But I don't think that he should. I've said even before they fired Landry, I said I would keep Quin for another year. It was interesting the way that they let Landry talk before he was fired, but he gave the full vote of confidence to Quin immediately, not going to fire him, et cetera, et cetera. I think if they were going to fire Quin, they probably would have done it when they fired Landry and just said, we're starting over. And they didn't do that. So that's kind of a tacit endorsement of Quin. It doesn't mean that he's 100% safe, but I think he probably is. They would have, like, it's a little weird that they're going to hand a head coach and a recently promoted GM to their new president. That's just an odd circumstance. Like, you wouldn't normally do that, but I think that's what they're going to do. And I think Quin does have the record dating back to Utah and the rep around the league where, like, he's respected. I don't think that a guy's going to come in and just fire Quin day one, probably. But look, yeah, if they don't win next year and it's not like so obviously injury related or something like that, the head coach usually gets the chopping block. Like oftentimes it's about, to bring back what I said earlier, managing expectations. If you meet expectations, your head coach is probably safe, generally speaking. Not always, but usually a good sign for him. If you fall short of expectations, it's either the star or the head coach or both that are in trouble, right? And I think Quin would probably be in trouble. And not that he's on the hot seat. He's not. I wouldn't say that. But I think that you got to win next year, especially when Tony just made this pretty drastic step to fire the GM and say, look, to me, he didn't announce this, but my feeling is like, all right, guys, we have to start winning games now, like more than this. I'm all for a process or whatever, but we got to win too, right? Like, it's one of those things. And Quin's I'm sure he knows that. And also, he's making a lot of money, which does matter. I think he's like a top 6 or 7 coach salary in the league. Maybe that's changed because I'm sure they've actually, since he signed, the guy's got a lot more money. Like some extensions that happened were big money, thanks to Monty Williams and that whole thing. Yeah. But Quin, I think Quin is a good coach, not an elite one. And I get in the frustration, but he's very obviously not a bad coach. Like to me, that's where I get a little bit like, I get it with people mad at him, but like he's not, I won't name names, but he's not a bottom 5 coach. He's just not. He's a good coach. He just has had some strengths and weaknesses, and I would hope that they give him more size to work with, because that's the one thing that he does do that I philosophically don't love, is that he really defaults to offense, and that usually means getting smaller, and that could lead to some tough. Again, the roster was really, 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 really rough at the end in the front court, which is part of this. But like when the chips are down, he usually leans to offense. That usually means getting smaller and weaker, and that could be tough.
Yeah, and I've said the same thing about him. I was just like, listen, no coach is perfect.
No,
every coach has a flaw. No coach bats 1,000%. It's just you just hope that a lot of the time the decisions they make always lead to success. And I've also said too with this Hawks team, they've always had a very small margin of error, even when they were healthy. Where if they have to play a certain way and do certain things to win, they're not like the top teams where Boston could easily have Tatum and Brown have bad nights and still beat you just because, White and Holiday and Porzingis could have good games, or they may not be great from 3 that night, but they're so talented they can score a bunch of points from 2. And they're not at that point. They need particular things to happen for them to win games, right? And so I think hopefully this coming season, they're looking to give him more assets to allow him to, like, again, continue to expand. Because you can look at a sample size, like I said, when I told you about the NBA Cup period of time, the winning streak, and say, okay, if we can get back closer to this and then just expand on this more, then that's where we can move forward in a positive direction with the team and success and winning more games, right? And you mentioned, obviously, we've brought it up. We haven't touched on it, Landry being fired.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on just where they might go? We know they want a veteran decision maker. They really want somebody who's established. We've heard so many names. We've heard the Minnesota Timberwolves GM if he opts out of his contract. We've heard Bob Myers. We've heard Elton Brand. I'm sure there's other names that people are going to talk about. What is there any names that stand out to you? Is there anybody that you're just like, this would be a home run? Or like, what are you wanting from that position, since that's, like you said, the person that Quin and the promoted GM is going to report to?
Yeah, I don't love the process of it all. And that's not to say that I thought it was crazy to fire Landry, because I didn't. The way that I put it on my show in the short version is like, I don't think Landry did anything that's like screamingly terrible to be fired after 2 years. But I also am more than okay with an owner being like, you know what, we don't think this guy's great, and we want to get better in this spot, and firing him. That's actually okay with me. It's a business. I get it. Everyone likes Landry, honestly, including me. Like, I think people like Landry, but I think that it's not crazy to move on from him. I'll stop there and say I have my issues with the ownership group. I don't think Tony's been very good overall as a basketball steward, and part of that's just being too meddling and some of those things there. And I have a hard time giving him the benefit of the doubt on a basketball decision, which is what this is, hiring this person, or even also not hiring. Like, I've floated this out there. It would not stun me if they just didn't hire a president. Like, they go through the process. They can't find anybody that fits Tony's narrow criteria. Like he's been laying out, senior level experienced person. Those guys are not that easy to get. Like, as far as like guys that I would be interested in. And they might just turn around and say, all right, Ance is going to run the show for a year, or we'll see what happens. They just promoted him anyway. And I like Ance Sala. The reputation of him is very good. So that's possible too. The names that have been reported, I don't love any of them. I mean, Tim Connolly would be the one where I would be like, yeah, if you can get Tim Connolly, you got to do it. But also, I think he probably stays in Minnesota, if I had to guess. And like, how much of that is realistic? It just maybe he's like, everyone knows he's going to be a free agent if he wants to be. And that means like he's kind of available. But short of him, like Bob Myers, yeah, maybe. But like, from what I've heard and what's even been reported, I think he's a West Coast guy, and I don't think he's going to come to Atlanta unless you just like bury him in money and make him say no. Bob Myers is fine. Like if they announced Bob Myers was the president of basketball operations tomorrow, I wouldn't criticize that move, but it doesn't move me. Like I don't think he was like this like earth-shattering executive in Golden State. It was kind of built kind of already when he got there, and he stewarded it well, to be fair. He has championships to prove it, so he did a good job, but not someone that I'm like clamoring to go get. Elton Brand, I love Elton Brand. I want to preface that. I covered Elton Brand as a player. Elton's first job as a GM figure in Philadelphia was pretty bad. So I don't know if that means this doesn't mean that he's disqualified, but the one sample we have of Elton being an executive did not go super well. So it's like, that's a tough sell to me. And I just don't love the process of being like, we have to get this senior big name person. It just feels like Tony wants a big name, like the Grant Hill thing. So John Hollinger, my friend, colleague at The Athletic, reported that he thinks that where like Grant Hill would be the guy if he wanted the job, and Grant just doesn't want the job. But like Grant Hill's famous, obviously, Hall of Fame player, respected person, but like he's not experienced at all. He's never done the job. So, like, do you want experience or do you want a big name? That's kind of and Grant's, by the way, a very, 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 very tiny ownership holder of the Hawks. Like, tiny. Like, he basically has the same stake that you and I have, just by a little bit more, I guess. And also, Hawks fans are mad at him because of USA Basketball, which makes me laugh every time. I don't care about that, but Hawks fans do, so it is what it is. So, no, long story short, like, there's not a name that I've heard out there that I'm super in love with. But when you put yourself into a corner on your own to say we want this kind of person, you either have to poach someone who's already on a team, that's really, really hard to do, or you got to get lucky if Tim Connolly comes loose, or you just got to kind of hire someone that's not exciting. Because like Elton Brand's available because Elton Brand's not doing it right now. Like Bob Myers is different because he's doing TV by choice. It seems like he could probably have a job somewhere if he wanted to. But aside from Bob Myers, like if you're out of work, like you're out of work for a reason in some ways. Like David Griffin's another name that's been floated out there. Just got fired in New Orleans. Like he's done a decent job in Cleveland and New Orleans, but like not a guy that I'd be like itching to go get. So I would probably just go with Ansi before most of the names that have been reported. But I don't know if I don't think it's a guarantee that they hire someone, but I also don't know if Tony might be hell bent on just like, we are going to hire a famous person to run our front office. And that seems like a Tony move to me, honestly. So
yeah. And I think that is bad. It's one of those things where you're already kind of not, the fans, obviously you're not, love wrestler or anything like that. And, obviously it's important to kind of nail this decision because you don't want to bring in someone who don't know anything and then it changes things. And then, people wonder how that will impact Trey, how that impact other guys. Will that make them rush? Because that may, that person may change the direction of how they want to do things.
Well, honestly, the implication of doing this, we touched on it earlier, but the implication of firing Landry Fields right now in the midst of this like retooling effort that you seemingly signed off on as the owner, you don't do that if you're not going to try to speed it up a little bit. In my opinion, like he didn't say that, but given Tony's history of wanting to speed it up and being active and being meddling, like I would be shocked if they didn't want. By the way, I say they, if Tony didn't want to speed it up, because you don't do this if you don't want to speed it up. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole reason to make a move like this is because you think you should be winning more games now. And that means generally like uncertainty, but also just means like more pedal to the floor than you were before.
Yeah. And I said too, I think that, the Hawks are in a position right now where, listen, you just have to really be careful about who you bring in because you are up on an upward trajectory. This isn't like you're no direction. You don't want to just mess everything up. It kind of reminds me of the Eastern Conference final year. Remember when they had just came off like another rebuilding season like that year, and then all of a sudden, we need to make the playoffs. And then they started being a little bit more aggressive. That's kind of what it reminds me of a little bit. So we'll have to see what happens. I'll have a couple more questions for you. I'll let you go, Brad. Backup point guard. obviously that's been a big question for the Hawks for years. Best sample size, what maybe we've gotten Lou Williams, DeLon Wright, quote unquote, in that range. A lot of people are out on Kobe Buffkin. It seems like they're just like, listen, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He needs to go. We can't wait. We got to find somebody. But I also say backup point guard is a very complicated position because it's not like this guy's been playing 20 minutes a night. Trae Young will get the bulk of the minutes unless it's a guy that can play at the 2 a little bit. And so what are you looking or what are you hearing? What are you looking at from that spot? Is Kobe, is it like Kobe is done? Like they are done with him? Or is it like, hey, we're maybe looking at a veteran, we're going to let him compete? What is that looking like right now?
I think the last thing you said is where I would guess that they are. But again, this is another one of these prime uncertainty things because you don't know who's running the basketball operations. Like that's a huge domino, right? We don't know. Ansi and Kyle Korver were here this last year. They know Kobe. Quin has always been a Kobe fan, from what I understand. But also, what does that mean after 2 years? Two things. Because, again, I acknowledge the uncertainty. I just did that. The second thing is he hasn't played. He was a lottery-level talent when they drafted him. That hasn't changed. He's still pretty young. He showed a little bit of something when he was been playing. He hasn't been terrible. It's been fine. My overall thing is that you can't go into this season fully banking on Kobe Buffkin as the only player in the role. That's what you can't do. If you want to give up on him, either via trade or whatever, like maybe sell low, essentially, like you could probably get something for him. You wouldn't get a first rounder for him anymore. That ship has sailed right now. But if you want to trade him and just kind of, all right, Kobe, fresh start for you, fresh start for us, move on, that wouldn't stun me. Or you bring in another person, probably a veteran, like you said, to compete with Kobe, or even just be ahead of Kobe, honestly, and say, all right, Kobe, we want to, hopefully you prove yourself healthy at some point. Maybe you challenge for minutes with somebody's hurt or whatever. You want the fridge rotation, or if you're just awesome, maybe you beat this guy out. And I don't, names are hard to do right now in April, but I do believe that they're going to want to bring in another guard of some kind, even if they like Kobe and they hope it's Kobe. You got to bring in somebody else. They tried to last summer, sneakily. I reported on it. They tried to sign Tyus Jones. They couldn't get him. I get it. But I don't think that I would go into this season. I think they won't probably do this with just Kobe gifted the role of backup point guard. You either have to move on from him or give him some competition, because as much as I like Buffkin, and I do, when you haven't played really at all for 2 years, you can't. And again, going back to this one more time, they're trying to win very obviously next year. That being gifted a role for 15 minutes a night for Buffkin is something that I would do. And Dyson bailing them out a little bit this year as the backup point guard was helpful, but they probably don't want to have Dyson have to do that. He can do it, but you probably don't want to have him do that. So bring in a veteran of some kind, whether it's a DeLon Wright type, not DeLon Wright. He's beyond that as much as I love him. But someone who's a competent backup point guard type would be helpful. It'd be better if that guy could play with Trae. Ideally, you would get someone that could not just play with Trae on the bench, not a tiny backup point guard. But if you got to do that, you got to do that. You got to plug the hole, and then hopefully, if Kobe's still here, you hope that guy just gets beat out by Kobe at some point.
Yeah, and I think too, like I said, the competition is probably the best. I know Tyus Jones might become a free agent again this year, so maybe that's something the Hawks can revisit potentially. Outside of that, I don't really know anybody. I know some people were like, well, why don't we give Keaton Wallace a shot? And I'm just like, I don't think they're going to. I think he's a good emergency guard if they need him, but I don't know if they'll ever view him as hey, he could be the guy at that spot.
That got, and I get it. I like Keaton, by the way, and I praised him all year long. That was a great, not just good, that was a great two-way signing. That's exactly what you want. A guy who can step in and play for you, but doesn't have to play for you. And he's on the older side. I think he's 25 already. Because he had that big game at the end of the year, and he was really good in that game. People were like, well, it should have been Keaton the whole time. I'm like, why did they ever try? Well, they did try Keaton repeatedly. They played him, and they basically said, we can't do this anymore. And they had to go to Dyson. They chose to play Dyson in the role because they didn't think Keaton could do it. And that's not a shot Keaton. Again, Keaton was a great two-way signing, but no, that's not a plan. I mean, they could sign Keaton to a minimum this summer. I would not be shocked by that at all. But as far as him being the backup point guard, by choice, that won't happen. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't see that happening either. But like I said, it's always good to have those solid two-way guys ready to go in case you need them. And they have a great development system down in College Park that they're continuing to build on. So my last thing for you, man, is this. So obviously we haven't talked about these two players yet, but I want to bring them up because I know you love them both. Dyson Daniels, Zachary Risacher.
Yep.
You know, we know Dyson has just emerged. You know, it's I don't know if he'll win any awards, but he'll be runner-up. I'm assuming for maybe one or two of them. We've seen you even talk about. I've talked about it. How the biggest question going into this year for him was offense. What was his offense going to look like? And it felt like he definitely progressed there throughout the season. I think he didn't take a lot of threes, but it seemed like when he did take them, he was making them more regularly. And then on top of that, I think he also was developing a shot profile. He kind of started figuring, okay, this is what I can do. This is where I can score. Because he said early in the season, I want to take pressure off Trey if I can. And then on Zach's side of things, we saw beginning of the year was a little rough for him. You know, every night he would ever have that big game here or there, but it was rough. And then, you know, as the season gone on, he became a little bit more of a consistent shooter. Steven had some strong games. And then, you know, we know playing was not his best games, right? We know that. For you, for those two guys, what are the biggest steps you want to see them make in their second year? Because Dyson, we know, we assume he'll get an extension. We'll assume he'll be there. He's a core piece. Zach, I've said the one thing will be interesting, especially if they sign Karis LeVert. Will he finish games if that's the case? Because that's the only person I would see you swapping out. And we know how he is in a ball creator, like he creates his own shot. But we know that he can shoot and he's very versatile defensively. So what are your expectations for those two guys going into this coming offseason? What do you want them to work on? What do you want to see them grow at?
Yeah, I mean, Dyson is interesting because he basically had a breakout. Like, he's most improved player finalist. Like, that was a great season. And I think the defense is the reason why, but also, like, I think he's underrated offensively now. Like, you can't fake 14 points a game and like 4.5 assists a game. Like, he did a lot of good things offensively to the point where there was a concern about his offense being like really not like unplayable, but challenged. And like, there are times when it's rough. Like at the end of the year, he had a couple bad playing games. Like, the shooting is not great, but he did shoot 34% from three. And not on zero volume, like 3.5 per game, something like that. Like, that's a reasonable amount of attempts. He made a reasonable amount of them. The Hawks are always yelling him to shoot more and be more aggressive. So that's the one thing that you hope that he just keeps getting better at, is just aggressiveness and shooting. The one sneaky, like very specific thing on offense is that I think he needs to finish better off of 1 foot. Like, he's basically exclusively a 2-foot finisher, which isn't super bad, but like it does limit you in like the way that you can be crafty around the rim. If you have to jump stop and finish off 2 feet every time, that's a little small thing, but something I'm noting. And defensively, there's nothing to work on. He's just awesome. And Risacher, it's just natural development. Like, he's super young. I mean, if you just bottle up the second half of the season, or even like the last 2/3 of the season, Risacher, over a full season, he probably would average, as a second year player, 15 points a game, a league average of better shooting. Like, that's already a good player. And I think with some natural development from him, offensively, you know, his ball handling could certainly use improvement. They know that. The big thing with Zach, like, beyond the skill development, he's got to get stronger. And they know that. Like, they said it last year. He's gotten stronger already. You can already see it. Like, I stood next to him last summer, stand next to him in April. He's a bigger guy now. He's thicker, but he's got a ways to go still. They know that. And that will help him in a lot of different ways. It'll help his finishing around the rim as a penetrator. He gets knocked off his spots really easily now when he tries to drive to the rim. Like, one little thing, he like kind of flies off path. Like, he's weak right now, which is fine. And they know that. And defensively, that will help him with that too. But, you know, he was already pretty good defensively this year, just being attentive. So as far as things that you can control, it's the obvious stuff, really. Dyson, it's the shooting and a little bit more finishing craft. Maybe a little bit ball handling too. Like, he's not the best ball handler in the world, but for a 2 guard, he's a good ball handler. It's just if you're going to ask him to be more of an initiator, which they did sometimes this year, a little bit tightening up there. And for Zach, it's like, as long as the shooting's real, that's a big thing. Like, it's not a question mark that he can shoot. We know he can, but how good of a shooter is Risacher is like maybe my number one like developmental question, because if he's a great shooter, he's going to be awesome. If he's just a pretty good shooter, like, he's going to be a good player no matter what. But there's a difference there. And that's kind of that was even the pre-draft thing about Risacher. It was like, there was a split on him, and a lot of it was like, how good of a shooter actually is he? And if the answer is awesome, then the Hawks are home free, because look, they needed to be a shooter. We talked about this earlier. They didn't have enough shooting this year. And part of that was that Zach wasn't the fully formed version of Zach. If they had a 23-year-old version of Zach Risacher this year, they would have been a lot scarier than they actually were. You know what I mean? But they have the 19-year-old version of Zach Ricochet, and they know that. So the good thing is those guys are like both like legendary workers. Like Dyson's a gym rat, so is Ricochet. They both are like super humble, like hardworking guys, and like humble's a loaded term sometimes. I don't mean it like anyway, but those guys are just. They're not worried about working. Like they're going to be in the gym. The Hawks. One of the reasons why the Hawks love both of them, especially when they drafted Ricochet, like they know this guy's going to work all summer long. We might see those guys again. Ricochet might not be at summer league. Like he doesn't need to be at summer for what?
Yeah,
what's he going to do at summer league? He might play a game or two because the league might just like, hey, we really need him to play a couple games. Like the number one overall pick from your previous year, he might play. But otherwise, you're not going to see Dyson until October, unless you're like looking at workout videos or whatever. But I can promise you those guys will be in the lab over the next few months.
Yeah, I can look forward to the development because they'll be a big part of the success and the jump the Hawks make next year in terms of, if, like I said, they do go on to win games and make the jump and top 6 and things of that nature. So a lot of things that are going to be found out throughout this offseason, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens, man. But I appreciate you, Brad, for coming on, man, to the Bleeding Hawks pod. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. I appreciate you doing this. I'm sure I talked way, way, way too much because I'm a solo podcaster. I just get talking. And I'm a solo podcaster too, so I get it. I'm like, am I still talking? Why am I still talking? I wrap the center up. So thank you for having me. Yeah, if you don't know, I am the host of Locked On Hawks. You can find it anywhere you find this podcast, I'm sure. YouTube, Apple, Spotify. That's the main place. I'm also at BT Rowland on either Twitter or Blue Sky. And then I have a Patreon if you are interested in the next version down, some extra stuff, written content, audio, etc. It's patreon.com/BT Rowland.
Yes, sir. And obviously, guys, y'all know Bleeding Hawks available on any podcast platform, like you just said. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment down below about anything we discussed, talked about. Go subscribe over to his channel as well, over in Locked On Hawks. And like I said, we'll have to see what the Hawks do as we continue to move forward into this offseason. But that's Brad. I'm Bryce. We'll see you next time.